Educational Communications and this station present Environmental Directions with Nancy Pearlman. On this series, we explore the effects of human influence on the Earth's ecosystems and discuss solutions to environmental problems which affect the quality of life on this planet. Environmental Directions gives you the kind of information you need to help you participate in decisions impacting your community, the nation, and the world. Now, here's your host, Nancy Pearlman.
Hello. We are going to be talking about observing planets and stars at observatories and new discoveries from the James Webb Telescope and other scientific discoveries about our skies with my guest, Rich Evirs. He is the co-host of the podcast, thedrunkenTaoist.com. He is currently a telescope demonstrator at the Griffith Observatory in Los Angeles, California. He is also an elementary school substitute teacher, and he has spent over a decade in the music business, making everything from EPKs to concert films to music videos. He was a former film editor for many movies and documentaries, including The Boys, The Sherman Brothers Story, When We Were Apollo, and Darfur Now. He has worked also with Ron Howard's Beatles documentary, 8 Days a Week. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we could spend a lot of time talking about the hundreds of movies that you have worked on. I am more fascinated by what you are currently doing. When I had the honor of hearing you present to visitors at the Griffith Observatory in Griffith Park, Los Angeles, what the telescope there could discover when people looked through it. What have some of those major discoveries been?
Well, the Griffith Telescope, that whole facility was opened in 1935. And it was all because of the giant telescopes that are actually the real scientific ones in LA that are up on Mount Wilson. So our telescope is a 12-inch refractor. It's a Zyscope. It's a fantastic piece of equipment. At 90 years old, we still look through it. We show 400 to 600 people through that telescope every night. It is perfect for where we are down in light-polluted LA. Even in the 30s, they realized that was going to be an issue. But the moon is extraordinary through it. We're finally getting planets back. Saturn is always incredible through it. Jupiter always fantastic. Star clusters, things like that. We're never going to do any kind of deep galactic research from that telescope, and the facility was never meant for that. It was always just about outreach. But when it comes to like the real, like heavy science, that was done on Mount Wilson in the early 1900s. 60-inch telescope. So the Zeiss telescope, 12-inch refractors. Those measure a telescope by the size of its light gathering capacity. So 12-inch, pretty nice. Anybody would love to have that at their house for sure. It is a pretty giant. It's 16 feet long. But the big ones on Mount Wilson, 60-inch mirror finished in 1907, 100-inch mirror finished in 1917. That was the biggest telescope in the world until the early 1940s.
There were so many discoveries made here in Southern California by looking at the sky. And yet now we have light pollution, and I think discoveries are being made at a telescope down in the Chilean desert.
Oh, the Vera Rubin. That's a game changer. I want to say that mirror is 8.4 meters. So massive, like a quarter of the size of a basketball court. And it takes these kind of quick shots where the James Webb is kind of looking at just a tiny chunk of the sky. This is looking at big pieces, and this is all sort of to do a complete look at the southern hemisphere globe of stars that we can look at and things beyond that. It takes these giant chunks with this huge mirror. I can't remember how many millions of megapixels it takes in each shot, but it's going to do it over the next 10 years and will cover the entire southern hemisphere over and over and over again. So it's building a giant time lapse of the entire southern hemisphere stars, which I can't imagine how awesome that's going to be once that's up and running.
We have to remember that when we look at the sky, we're seeing a different sky than they do in the southern hemisphere. We're in the northern hemisphere, and I noticed that when I took a ship around the world that went across the equator from up north down south.
Yep.
The sky looked different, and also the different cultures have different astrology. Constellations are different than what we call the Big Dipper or something else. They create other kinds of images.
Well, people associate it, I'm sure it goes all the way back to hunter-gatherer days. I'm sure they had names for everything back then. I've never been far enough south. Were you able to see the Magellanic Clouds? They are two dwarf galaxies. They look like little purplish blue clouds in the sky, but the Milky Way has a whole lot of these looks like they just kind of scooped them up into their orbits, but I believe 35,000 and 45,000 light years away, but they're little smaller dwarf galaxies that have been captured by the Milky Way, and that's only visible in the southern skies. I've only seen it through, NASA has done these really cool, just sort of like a planetarium show, but it's goggles. So when you look down to the south, there they are by the southern crux, these little clouds that are actually tiny galaxies orbiting our galaxy. Incredible. I'll make it down there someday for sure.
There is so much up there in the sky. Have astronomers determined how many stars we can see in our telescopes? How many planets there are? How many galaxies there are?
The numbers keep going up crazily pretty much by the day. If you take it just for your naked eye, if you were in perfect dark conditions like in the desert or up on a mountain somewhere, the globe of stars goes out to about 1,500 light years. Beyond that, it sort of smears into the rest of the Milky Way, the other 400 billion stars that are our fellow stars inside our galaxy. But the stuff you see as actual stars in the sky doesn't go out that far. It's just kind of a tiny piece. The first thing you can see is something called the Great Nebula in Orion, which is one of my favorites. If you're familiar with the Orion constellation, it has the belt stars that literally look like these three right across from each other across the sky. That'll be up in the fall. Below the belt, there's something called the Sword. It is a perpendicular line with three more objects below it, and the center of those two looks like a smear. That smear is a cloud of gas 52 light years across. It has 1,000 stars forming inside of it, and it's pretty much the furthest thing your naked eye can see inside our galaxy. There's some cores of galaxies that you can see that are bright enough, but this is inside our galaxy. It's just something poetic that our weak human eyes, the furthest thing we can see is a cloud of gas that has over 1,000 stars forming inside of it.
There is so much to see, and you mentioned planetariums. The Griffith Observatory not only lets you look through a telescope to the sky, but presents planetarium shows. And also, I must admit that they have greatly updated their exhibits, and they're fascinating. They're using all sorts of interactive tools to show people the planets, the stars. Tell us a little bit about what one can see when one goes to the observatory, other than a beautiful view of the entire Los Angeles basin to the ocean.
Oh, yeah.
And the Hollywood sign can be seen from there.
You'd be surprised how many people ask why it isn't lit at night. I have to let them know. Do you remember at the Millennium, when it flipped over, they had it lit for about 8 weeks, and the outcry was so much to turn it off that it didn't last very long. I didn't actually see it in person, but I've heard tales of it for sure. It's a fantastic observatory. I mean, the architecture itself is worth going up. I mean, it's incredible. Built, I don't know if it's a civilian conservation corps, but it was one of those Depression-era programs that it was built under. To this day, it looks like it was kind of out of history almost. So I just can't brag enough about how incredible it is. And that's just the architecture. The main floor that you go up to, so the stuff you see when you walk into the main floor, that's all the stuff from 1935. So that's all the exhibits that were there originally, updated a bit from here and there. But the 2 floors below, the reopening was probably 2006-ish. They literally built 2 more floors of exhibits underneath, and just incredible stuff down there. I mean, there's meteorites you can touch, huge ones you can actually look at that are there as well. A complete scale model of the solar system. Well, a lot of people don't know when you go down there, the Leonard Nimoy Event Horizon Theater is down there. So it's one of the couple theaters that we have in the building. That will look like a big gold circle in the main room down there on the bottom floors. That is the size of the sun compared to the planets that are on display over your head. On that scale, Jupiter and Saturn look plenty big, but Pluto is about 2 inches across.
The observatory is in Griffith Park, one of the largest urban parks in the entire country, and they're wonderful hiking trails, and you can see deer and coyote and other animals. So you get both nature on land, you get the sky, and you get an incredible experience of learning about what's around us in this beautiful Art Deco building. I saw you at the telescope, and you just said that it's the same telescope that's 90 years old. Are you telling me that telescopes haven't been modernized, that they are as useful now as when they were made?
The beautiful thing about that is there are tons of advancements going on right now. The observatory does a star party once a month, and a lot of folks from the Los Angeles Astronomical Society come out. These folks are invited up. There'll be 40 to 60 more telescopes on the lawn. It's one Saturday a month. If you go to Griffith.org, it'll have what days those are. There are telescopes now where just something you can have in your backyard, it will kind of stack photos, so you can sort of build up the light, and you can see things like the Ring Nebula that are just barely visible through a reflecting telescope that's just catching the light, that do incredible things. Just kind of on the fence about it, because it's just like looking at a screen, and it does incredible things. But what I love about the old telescopes is that when Jupiter gets back up and it's 450 million miles away, the light you are seeing left the sun, it's probably, let's say it's an hour and 20 minutes out, an hour and 14 minutes back. That journey, the only thing that light has touched is the atmosphere of the planet Jupiter, the four surfaces of the moons that you see as well, our atmosphere, and two pieces of glass. And to see that through that lens, you can't compare it to a TV monitor or a computer monitor. This is the actual light out of the sky. So it may not be the snazziest, fanciest thing in the world, but there's just something about that connection that this is just actual photons doing their thing, exposing the world to you.
One does not have to have a telescope. You actually looked up into the sky with binoculars to see the comet Hale-Bopp in 1997. There have been many other comets that one can see without the telescope.
Yeah, actually, comets are better with binoculars, because a lot of times, especially when you have the tail sort of stretching out, like both of the launch scopes that we have, because we have 11-inch launch scopes we put out in addition to the Zeiss as well. So there's always 4 telescopes every evening, but Mondays to look through. If it's not cloudy or raining, they'll be there, and you're welcome to look through all of them. Binoculars have a wider view, so that's great for comets because you can get the tail in there as well. You use the telescope, you're more looking like the coma of it or the center part, and it's just sort of a fuzzy dot. So comets are actually a little better with binoculars. Hyakutake was the one before. We had 2 great comets in a row in 96 and 97. It's one of those things that really changed my life. Hyakutake was first, February to April 1996. That was like 25 degrees across in the sky. So that's like 2 fist lengths held up in the sky. That's how giant that thing was. And before it was completely gone, Hale-Bopp showed up. I actually bought my first pair of binoculars because I was excited to check it out. And we knew where it was supposed to appear very shortly as it got closer to us and started outgassing so that you could actually see it even better. I remember we'd go every couple of nights, and one night it was cold and I didn't want to go, and my wife's like, look, we bought these silly binoculars, let's go have a look. And that night, that spot where we looked at nights and nights before, there was a tiny little fuzzy splotch, the comet coming towards us.
I absolutely love your love of the sky and sharing it with people, having all of us enjoy what's around us, not just on land, but up there above us. If people wanted to contact you, how do they do that?
Instagram, it's Mr. Cosmic Wanderer. That's a good one.
They can also listen to your podcast.
Yeah, I've been doing a podcast for 14 years with my pal Daniele Vallely called The Drunken Taoist, and it comes from way back. That's a crazy story by itself. He had been advertising a book called 50 Things You Don't Know About Religions, and I was heard of him on a podcast and just randomly reached out on Facebook, and we decided to make our own podcast. Pretty much ended up a lot more about raising daughters and life in these times, various interviews to just us chatting, but it's been going on for a long time, and people are always welcome to check it out. My email is therichiemon@gmail.com. THERICHIMON, and you're welcome to reach out and have a chat.
And of course, they can go up to the observatory and have you share many, many different facts and discoveries about our skies. The Griffith Observatory belongs to the city of Los Angeles. It's free to enter, but when is it open?
That's an excellent question. Thank you for asking. Kind of the most important part about that place is it is always free to come in. It is always free to look at the telescopes. Parking is an issue, and that's a bit of a bummer, but make it up there. There's free parking down at the bottom. You can take shuttle buses up. We are open every day but Mondays, and if it's cloudy or raining, we won't be able to look at the telescopes, but we get about 300 good days a year. Wait till about mid-October, because we'll have Venus and Saturn prominently back up in the sky. It gets dark a lot earlier, and it's just a perfect time to come out and check it out. Plus, we'll be getting Orion back in the sky as well.
We're going to talk more about these issues in a moment when we return with my guest, Rich Evirs.
Environmental Directions with Nancy Pearlman continues with further discussion of the world's critical ecological issues. For more information, you may call 310-559-9160 or go to www.ecoprojects.org. Now, here's Nancy.
I'm speaking with Rich Evirs, who is a telescope demonstrator at the Griffith Observatory in Los Angeles. At the observatory, you present the science as we know it. You also tell us about new discoveries. What have been some discoveries that you have found out about that fascinate you as you learn more about the skies?
One of my favorite recent ones, the James Webb Telescope, took a good look at the Great Nebula in Orion, scanned it, and when they started looking through what they found out, they started finding pairs of Jupiter-sized planets orbiting each other, hanging out together, no star involved. So the Great Nebula in Orion is a massive cloud of gas. It has over 1,000 star systems forming inside of it. So it's not kind of out of the realm of possibility that this would happen, because we have all this gravity, and stars form their planets while they're forming. The whole solar system forms together. To find 12 of these pairs of Jupiter planets just hanging out that they didn't expect to see, I just thought that was both hilarious and awesome. And once they kind of said, oh, look at this, let's take a better look, they found 37 of them, and they found 3 triples. I'm sure the notion is that with all this gravity and all these different star systems, things are going to get bumped, and these large planets can be particularly susceptible to that. And it looks like they're getting bounced around, but they're finding each other, and they're going to live there in the nebula as just a nice pair or even a triple orbiting each other and having a nice time here in creation like that. That's one of my favorites. They're called jumbos.
Do you ever wish that you made a discovery looking through that telescope?
I've never been on the research end of it. I've always been on the outreach end of it. Those folks that do that stuff, they're so dedicated. I mean, it would be incredible, but that's not the focus of what I'm doing. I'm introducing folks to the telescopes. Currently, the James Webb Telescope is sort of unfurling a lot of things we thought we were certain about. They have found, at 200 million years, kind of looking back through time the way it does, up and running Milky Way-sized galaxies that don't quite fit into our whole idea of the Big Bang. It looks like what's probably going to turn out is the Big Bang happens inside of an even larger universe that could be infinite. Who knows? We'd never be able to figure it out anyway. And there may be pre-existing things. And it's basically like our area got redlined and they blew up this new version of the universe where we're at. But that's pretty exciting. That's the kind of thing I love about science, is that when you get something wrong, you got to tear a few pages out of your beloved book and get your protractor out and take another shot at it. That's kind of the cool thing about it, because essentially most of what the Big Bang represents is working properly. The whole idea is like that's the universe in a whole. That looks like that's kind of falling apart. There's a much larger universe containing that. And they're finding little things right now they call little red dots that they're really uncertain of at all, but they're finding them all over the place. And sort of the latest idea that might be black holes with gas surrounding them, and the energy of the black hole makes these glow. But this is like cutting edge. They're not certain what they are at all.
You were a film editor, worked on many different movies as well as documentaries, ranging from musicals to historic people. But you also were lucky enough to work on When We Were Apollo, about the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 11 mission. How important is it to send our astronauts up into the sky?
I think we're fine for like long distance things. Initially, we're going to send machines out for sure, just because some of these voyages are, we'll never be able to survive them. But to actually have humans out there interacting with stuff, I don't think a machine will ever be able to react in the time that we need to. There's brave folks to go out and do it. The one thing what I really like about When We Were Apollo is it more focuses on the blue-collar folks, not so much astronauts and engineers, as more of the people that built the buildings and built the spaceships and sewed the spacesuits. It's just a kind of better look at it all. There's a fellow in there, that famous picture of the ring separation, and you can see the curvature of the Earth, probably one of the most positive images of a very dark century. That was developed by a guy who lives in Torrance. He's still alive. They gave him the size of a 2-liter Coke bottle to put a 16-millimeter camera that knew when to turn on, when to jump off, and able to survive floating in the ocean for months so that we were able to get those pictures. It's just incredible. And you can look at all these shots. NASA pretty much has all the footage that was taken online, and you can look at every bit of it. So if you look at these shots where it's very famous because the ring separates and it's sort of getting, as the next set of engines are firing off, it gets wobbled and sort of shaky. But the camera itself literally launches out. So the last 5 or 6 frames of those shots or it jumping off the ship and parachuting down to the ocean so that we could have those photos.
And I'll never forget back with Earth Day in 1970, using the picture of the Earth that the astronauts shot.
Absolutely.
An incredible view from a different angle than what we have here.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure you've heard about the overview effect that, like, all the astronauts say. Once you get up there and you're looking down at it and see that this little tiny fragile thing is where all of us are at, really sort of resets their minds in a way maybe we could all use.
You pointed out that science does change as new discoveries are made, and that's the value of having thorough scientific research in every field. Do you think that we need more films about the scientific discoveries so that people are aware that there's a lot being discovered, there's a lot that we need to know about that can benefit us here on this planet, particularly in this time of our global warming and climate change?
I think it's more important than ever now. I get to chat with flat earthers and 6,000-year-old earthers and moon deniers all the time up there. And it's just sort of a contrarianism going on right now that I think they just like to do it to get a rise out of people more than anything than actually believe in it. The exposure to all that is important, and new discoveries are exciting. I worry that these young kids, I think they spend a lot of time staring at screens, but they're not learning much. They're just sort of entertaining themselves.
What do scientists want to discover when they're looking through the telescope? What would be really important to us now?
That's a great question. It's so varied and incredible, and there's so much of it out there. I think it just sort of is what you stumble upon. Exoplanets, those are planets around other stars. They're the only ones inside our galaxy, but I know when they reopened the observatory, I think we had been up to about 260 exoplanets. I think that's 6,200 now that are planets identified around other stars, so other solar systems. I think they really do want to find a place that's like us. We're seeing different things like weird chemical compositions that they think this may show there's life going on, or this may show that there's industry going on. It's just too impossible to tell at these distances, because even every one of these, it's just all so far away. I always like to talk about on the lawn of the observatory, there are the orbits of the planets. So on that scale, the sun will be the size of a penny or a marble. And so when you're standing there by the front of the stairs, that means a foot is 20 million miles. So at your feet, Mercury, Venus, Earth is 4 feet away, Jupiter is barely into the lawn, and Pluto and Neptune would take up the entire property up there. On that scale, the closest star, which is a red dwarf called Proxima Centauri, 4 light years away, would be a pea in Las Vegas. That's how far apart they are. As much as we're excited about finding, life in other places, I mean, first of all, who would want to see the humans showing up at their house anyway? Nobody. But we got to worry about what we got right here. I tell people all the time, when Hubble first figured out galaxies up on Mount Wilson, it was Andromeda first, and then it sort of got out the redshifting concept, got them to figure out these distances and these things they called spiral nebulae. They were galaxies, they just didn't have it figured out yet. But when they first figured out with redshifting that, this is 16 million light years away, this is 30 million light years away, these other galaxies, those numbers were boggling. There's actually photoplates up on Mount Wilson you can see where there's a couple of spiral nebulae, later named island universes, and then finally galaxies. I wish they stuck with island universes. I like that a lot better. There's hundreds and hundreds of specks on the background of these photoplates they took. Those are all galaxies too, and it's just unbelievably gigantic. And even at that time, I don't think they were willing to think or even put it in their heads that things that could be that distant to that point, but they are indeed. Of all things, the Hubble Space Telescope, back when it was up and running, the first big scan it did got us to 330 billion galaxies in the visible universe, because it reaches a point where there's light that can never reach us, so it goes on beyond what we can see. James Webb is going to get us to about 2 trillion galaxies in the visible universe, and all that's fantastic and wonderful, and I love looking at the sky, and it's impressive, but who cares about 2 trillion galaxies when we don't do a damn thing to take care of our own planet? It is an embarrassment on a scale that is unacceptable for all time. We allow billionaires and corporations to poison our planet while we sit around and act like it's not important. I am so impressed that you were involved with the first Earth Day. And just imagine a version of this world where we actually woke up and we're breathing clean air and everything was electric or whatever whatever other things we could find that would make our planet better for everybody. Because just wrecking it doesn't make any sense. It's unbelievable what we allow to happen. And all in the name of the mighty dollar, it's disgusting.
We certainly have to care about our planet here while we're learning about what's out there. You mentioned some people that don't want to accept the dating of our solar system, of our planet.
Yeah.
That's a current controversy going on. There was a time before telescopes when some people thought that the sun revolved around the Earth, but there was a telescope that showed that the Earth revolved around the sun. How long did it take for science to be accepted? And how long will it take before people will acknowledge the scientific way of determining the age of our planet and of our stars and everything else that we see?
That's a tough one. I don't know if we'll ever get all the way that way. The whole idea of a, call it heliocentric version of the solar system where the sun's in the middle of everything, the planets orbit around it. That goes back to an Indian astronomer, Aryabhata. He was like the 400s was when he kind of had that figured out. And then Copernicus had it figured out in his lifetime, but never told anybody because he was afraid. He literally on his deathbed handed it off to somebody else. Kind of the most famous person to actually get in trouble for it was Galileo. Galileo was the first person to put a telescope up to the sky and kind of actually get a good look around with it. He looked at Jupiter one night and saw these 3 dots around it. And this is like a 2-inch telescope, but it was enough to sort of separate those, and those were actually moons, but he had no idea. He looked again the next night, there were 4 dots. Now he didn't know what was going on, but looked for 6 or 7 weeks and figured out, I guess there was no Netflix and it was dark skies, so it must have been easier for him back then. Literally figured out these little dots were rotating around. He's called them tiny worlds around the planet Jupiter. Of all things, growing up, a friend of his ended up being the Pope. And when he told the Pope, he was put under house arrest for the rest of his life because they weren't going to allow any blasphemy like that around. So getting out from under things like that, I don't know if it's ever possible. I think maybe that's the grand vexing of humanity, that we sit and fight about these things we don't know about or can't totally prove and just make everybody miserable when we should just have a good look and be allowed to think for yourself. I guess it's okay to have your own opinions, but convincing people of something they don't want to believe, it's impossible.
Scientists make discoveries, and looking at the sky, they're finding things. But recently I heard that some planets got renamed, or they're not planets or moons. Or could you explain some of the changes that have been made in the astronomical community?
The big one, and oddly enough, I think it's almost 18 years ago now, is poor Pluto getting demoted. Pluto's just fine. It's where it is, always has been. It just sort of doesn't qualify to be a full planet because it's a great deal smaller.
What is the definition of a planet then?
You have to have a few things. You have to have cleared your own orbit, and that's where Pluto gets into trouble because it actually crosses into Neptune's orbit. Also at an angle where the rest of the 8 planets we have left are all sort of on the same plane with the sun. This is tilted by a great degree. I know they just discovered a new sort of Pluto-sized object just days ago, and there's 6 or 7 other of them already discovered as well. Outside, these are called trans-Neptunian objects. It's sort of like frozen leftovers from the creation of the solar system. We're pretty sure they're going to find between 12 and 1,500 more Pluto-sized objects out on this giant collection of space. Kuiper Belt is what it's called. They're hard to see because the orbits are slow, they're tiny, and it's cold out there. But as these telescopes get better, they're finding more and more of them. They're actually really trying to look for a Planet 9 right now because there are different little bodies that have weird reactions, like there are being gravitationally disturbed by a bigger object. They just haven't been able to nail it down yet. The search goes on and on. I think these youngsters should be encouraged to keep looking for them because it'll be exciting to discover. Another one that was sort of renamed a dwarf planet as well is Ceres. It's in the asteroid belt, but it is circular because of its size. It actually was designated as a dwarf planet. So they're all over the place, and it's just as the telescopes get better and the big ones can see colder and further things, we're going to see more and more.
A while back, I saw a documentary about some women at a university who worked in a lab who counted the stars from photographs because they weren't allowed to look in a telescope.
Isn't that crazy?
They did a lot of incredible work. Are you finding that that some of the people involved historically are now getting credit for some of their discoveries?
The Vera Rubin, that's the one in Chile. She was an astronomer. Her discoveries were like galactic rotation and things like that. She lived from 1928 to 2016. She got credit pretty much while she was in. This is like the 70s when she was at work. And to name that telescope for her was a grand thing. But I love all these STEM programs we have going, and I love all the little girls involved. And there's so many people that were forgotten in time. There's all sorts of trailblazers from back in the day.
Research is certainly different than education, and you're a great educator. You share what has been discovered with others. It's so great that you share your love of looking at the sky and your knowledge with the public. Thank you so very much for all that you do. Thank you for being my guest.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me along. I was so excited.
I have been speaking with Rich Evirs, who is a telescope demonstrator at the Griffith Observatory and formerly a video editor of films and documentaries. I'm Nancy Pearlman. Thank you very much for joining us, and do tune in again next week.
If you would like free information about these environmental issues, go to www.ecoprojects.org or call 310-559-9160. Environmental Directions with your host, Nancy Pearlman, is a community affairs program of the nonprofit organization Educational Communications and this station.